On this episode of China Unscripted, Twitter roots out Chinese Communist Party propaganda, but Zoom is more than happy to comply with Chinese censorship. And what's scarier, the Chinese Communist Party or Disney? Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnesta.
Well, good news, everyone. I know there was a lot of concern, about the U.S. economy over the coronavirus. So, we'd be hit by a really bad recession. But the good news is that so many American companies have sold out to China that we should have loads of money.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that we've been in a recession since February, which is what the data now shows.
No, we've sold out to China. It's great. We're going to be fine. So, first of all, well, I guess let's talk about a bit the media thing that just came out that China Daily, which is essentially it's run by the Chinese Communist Party propaganda department. They've been paying millions of dollars to U.S. newspapers to put propaganda in their newspapers.
I mean, we knew that they were doing this for years. We just
had the numbers.
We didn't know how much money they were spending before. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been like Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, all printing this China Watch section full of, Xi Jinping pledges to eliminate poverty, whatever.
And how great we are at fighting the coronavirus.
And the way these media justified it is it's like, oh, it's just a paid advertisement. And they even wrote like in small letters, paid advertisement. But the thing is, the paid advertisement looks like a newspaper article. Looks like a series of newspaper articles.
Well, it looks like a section of a newspaper, actually, is what it looks like. It's like, oh, here's our A section, here's our sports section, here's our China Watch section.
Yeah, so it looks like it's the reporting of the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or the New York Times.
Right. But I mean, like, just because it's a paid advertisement doesn't mean the newspaper, has no responsibility. I mean, like, newspapers wouldn't run certain types of political ads. They wouldn't run ads that are, racist or sexist, even if they got money for it. So, they can still choose what to run and what not to run.
I mean, I think it's a little more subtle than that. It wasn't like China Watch was just like, the front page was America is evil or something like that.
No, it wasn't. The front page was China is great.
Yeah, it's a more subtle type of propaganda that you can then justify by saying, well, we say it's a paid advertisement. There says, this is a publication of China Daily. We have these disclaimers and things like that. So it's not, we're clear that it's an ad.
Yeah. And also in all of this, it came out that Twitter was also getting paid too, correct? I mean, not in the million.
No. I mean, I think that what basically happened was that China Daily is a registered foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. So every year or every 6 months, they have to provide certain information to the U.S. government about their activities in the U.S. Now, apparently, they were recently asked by the U.S. government to submit some supplemental materials dating back to 2017. And I say apparently because actually it was the Daily Caller who first did a story on this. Mm-hmm. But they were looking at these FARA documents, the amendments that they were recently filed. And so it looks like the U.S. government had asked them going back to 2017 to give them a breakdown of what they spent, how they paid U.S. companies.
And this is the first time they've done it.
Yeah. So it looks like before they didn't have to file that information, and now the U.S. government asked them for supplemental information. So now we get to see how many millions of dollars they paid.
The Washington Post,
what was it?
The Wall Street Journal.
19 million total?
19 million total, but that includes, they were paying certain U.S. media companies money for printing the paper because China Daily has their own print edition.
So they have to hire a printing press.
They have to hire a printing press. So some of that information was going to the LA Times or different, media organizations that had their printers.
I see.
So there's some of that information was for printing. And then some of that information, some of that money was for advertising. And I think the bulk of the advertising money in the millions was going to Washington Post and Wall Street Journal. New York Times had definitely carried more China Watch in the past, but I think in these filings, it only showed 1 month of advertising to the New York Times.
I see. Yeah, because I remember, and this is at least 4 or 5 years ago, I remember seeing it probably at least once a month in the New York Times. And my dad, who is or was at the time an avid New York Times reader, would, they'd be, oh, Matt, I saw a China Watch section. Is this, what do you think of this? And I'd be like, I think it's propaganda, Dad.
Yeah. But now the Twitter thing.
Well, Twitter, China Daily had also been paying like $20,000 a month to Twitter for advertising, probably for promoting sponsored tweets and things like
Which
that.
I don't understand, because like those tweets are so gold on their own. I don't know why they need to.
I mean, this is only China Dailies, so we don't know about other Chinese media, state-run media, paying ads on Twitter. Like, China Daily is not actually the most active Chinese state-run media. I would say Global Times, People's Daily, and Xinhua are more
And we're
active.
talking about China Daily right now, which is different than the China Watch section that is being printed.
Right.
China Watch is from China Daily. So
Mhm.
China Daily is the overall media company that is very, their actual ownership is pretty murky.
No,
But-
it's the Communist Party.
Well, I mean, ultimately, I think it belongs to the Central Propaganda Department of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. But it's also partially under the State Council Information Office. It's like the way they do that is
I think there's
things are under a lot of.
There's
Yeah.
a term for the whole group, which is the Dirty Reds.
Matthew.
But anyways, it's interesting that this also came out about Twitter, because Twitter recently, or just today actually, as of recording this, shut down. How many accounts was it?
170 China-related accounts that were, they called it, spreading disinformation.
Specifically about coronavirus, or just in general?
Some of it was about coronavirus, but a lot of it was, kind of just what looked to be bots or inauthentic accounts. And they knew to target like some of these accounts because the IPs were coming from mainland China. And that is suspicious because Twitter is blocked in mainland China. So even if Chinese Twitter users are using Twitter, they usually have to use a VPN that will show them coming from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that was a
That was a
tell.
clue.
Yeah.
And, a lot of these accounts, like I've certainly been seeing a lot of it on Twitter as well as Instagram, and actually a lot on Instagram. But yeah, you'll see somebody who has whose account was created like 3 months ago, has like 2 followers, no posts, and they will like say something about.
Yeah, on
China.
Twitter, it's a lot of like retweeting Chinese state-run media Twitter accounts.
To be fair, I do that too.
I mean, also on Twitter lately, we've seen just in the last few months, all of these individual like foreign ministry spokespeople or other, Chinese ambassadors to different countries suddenly joining Twitter. It's obviously some kind of concerted campaign, like PR campaign on the Chinese government's behalf, where they suddenly decided that, hey, a lot of U.S. media people and, influencers are on Twitter. Therefore, we should go on Twitter to spread our message. Sometimes successfully, sometimes less successfully. Like when Jolly Jan accused the U.S. military of spreading the coronavirus. That probably was a self-own there.
A
But-
misstep.
But
Yeah, well, I'm actually glad he did that, because how many times have we been able to make fun of them for that?
that's true. It's been gold for us. Also, there was a particular Chinese official who was actually a Chinese Communist Party official who joined Twitter. Not like a government official, but like literally like a Chinese Communist Party official who joined Twitter for the first time. So, it's the invasion of Twitter.
Mm.
But
This is the true Chinese invasion threat. I'm just looking at our bookshelf at Ian Easton's book, The Chinese Invasion Threat. That's what made me think
I
of it.
thought you were looking at me. I didn't know.
No.
Thought it was strange.
I'm looking at you, Chris.
you guys have to stop making eyes at each other during our podcast.
Oh, yes.
So after the podcast.
Yeah, you go to town. But what I found that was funny about the whole Twitter story is the foreign ministry's response. Do you know about this?
I don't know about this.
That they basically said that, if Twitter really wanted to target disinformation, they should ban Twitter accounts that criticize China, because China is actually the biggest victim of disinformation.
You know, that reminds me of someone I follow on Twitter wrote a clever tweet that said, like, my favorite Chinese Communist Party propaganda line is, "We are the biggest victims of insert whatever they've been accused of." That was a clever tweet from someone I follow on Twitter.
But you can't remember who.
I can't remember who it was.
Uh-huh.
No, but I like their statement because, like, it is true that Chinese people are the biggest victims of disinformation.
That's not what they said, Matt. They
That
said
China is the biggest. But yeah, I mean, it's true, right? I mean, like you have you've 1.4 billion people in China who are victims of this. So I totally agree.
That's true. I don't think they meant it like that. I think Hua Chunying would be out of a job if she said that. But
no, I think I'm going to twist her words.
you know, you have that total right. I mean, it is my favorite propaganda line though, because it is so just like the boldness and like grandiosity of just being like, we didn't do that. We're actually the biggest victims of that. You know?
Wait, you tweeted that, Shelley? Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
Were you going to call me a twit?
I don't know what I was going to say. It's been a long day.
It has been a long day. We're very busy. But hey, coming up, we have a really exciting interview on this topic of American companies selling out to China. In a moment, we're going to get to an interview with Joe Fengsuo. He was a Tiananmen student leader, and he's had some issues with Zoom, which we've talked a bit about on this show, but has an interesting relationship with China.
I mean, everybody has an interesting relationship with China now.
I guess, yeah, we have an interesting relationship with China from a certain point of view.
And what point of view is that?
I don't know. I just like quoting Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, I don't get it.
Have you not seen Star Wars?
Like the original one?
Yes.
The original 3.
It's been a long time. I haven't seen them in a while.
Well, fortunately, I can quote line for line the entire trilogy. Here we go. This is going to be good. This is going to be a 6-hour long podcast.
I was just like, how far are you going to take this?
That's when they're in the hall and they're shooting at each other. And then, all right, okay.
Wait, I was like, shouldn't you start with the scroll?
No,
That's a good
we should
point.
do it the way that Chris did
Well,
it.
I couldn't start with the scroll because the scroll itself doesn't have sound. It would have to be the music.
And that would get us copyright strikes?
Yeah. And I also don't think I could do the music for the entire trilogy.
Are you sure there's no like copyright on pew 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 pew?
There might be. I hope not. I hope we're not in that much of a dystopia yet.
Yeah, I mean, but speaking of dystopias where things are controlled by Disney, well, because one of the things that happened is that we had a T-shirt.
Right.
On
Oh,
Teespring.
we have not up.
We've never actually talked about what happened.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about this.
So we had a T-shirt which Seamus, who's our video editor, designed.
If you're watching on YouTube, we can put up an image of that.
Yeah. And so, but I'll also describe it for our listeners, which is basically it's Xi Jinping wearing a Winnie the Pooh suit, like a costume, and he's got like the
Like
head.
a mascot.
Yeah, like a mascot costume, and he's got the head part off, so you can see that it's Xi Jinping.
And he looks very depressed.
Right. And so, like,
It was our most popular T-shirt.
it was absolutely the most popular and my personal favorite one. And Seamus did an awesome job with it. And then once we we had actually had it, it was approved by Teespring, and then YouTube approved it to show it underneath our channel, and it was running for like 2 months. And then we mentioned on one episode that the first time we really like actively mentioned our T-shirt campaign, and then suddenly Teespring shut down not just that one design, but our entire store, citing an infringement of their policies. But basically what it comes down to is they were concerned that because it was a parody of Winnie the Pooh, and Winnie the Pooh is owned by Disney, that there could be a trademark issue. And we weren't, we didn't have permission to use a Winnie the Pooh image, even though I think it would be easy to argue in a court of law that, a parody of something that is trademarked is defensible as fair use. But Teespring is not a court of law. It's a company that's arbitrary, and they shut it down. It's also possible that they didn't like it because it featured Xi Jinping, although I'm not sure. Like, I kind of have the feeling that Teespring is probably even more afraid of Disney.
That actually, well, first it made me think of the South Park episode that was about Chinese censorship that like had a lot of Winnie the Pooh in it. And then also what we really need to do is somehow get Disney and China to fight. I'm not sure how that would happen because there are Disneylands in China. So there would have to be some kind of probably big rift. But then companies would have to choose between who they're more scared of, Disney or China. And I think Disney would win.
Down.
Yeah.
Hands down.
So
yeah, I mean, Disney is a shockingly powerful company when it comes to not only their legal power, but also their lobbying power. Like the reason, because I had studied U.S. copyright law because I was a while ago teaching a course in that. And like, it turns out that the original U.S. copyright law was something like 26 years after creation. The idea of the law, is to ensure that people, will still keep creating stuff so they can make profit off of it, but not so long that it stifles further creation. But what's happened is gradually over the couple centuries, and in particular because of lobbying by Disney, now copyright law is essentially what for a human lifetime is forever. So like it's like the lifetime of the creator plus, I think
the 20 years or no?
It's I forget what it is, but it's after that. And then for corporate creations, because like the other type of creation is like a company hires someone to do it and the copyright belongs to the corporation. So then it's like 95 years after it's created, it still belongs to the company. Because the lifespan of a corporation like Disney can be longer than a human life. And so essentially,
it's gonna be.
Yeah. So like
it's certainly going to be longer than your lifespan after criticizing Disney. FYI.
Yeah, but it's just like the power that they have to stifle further innovation is incredible. But also just like this fear factor where like we do a parody, which is protected as free speech under the U.S. Constitution, and clearly protected by quite a number of fair use cases in U.S. case law. And yet, a company is like freaked out that, whoa, what's going to happen to us?
Yeah, I mean, Teespring we could take the risk ourselves if we wanted to print our own shirts, right? But Teespring doesn't want to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, Disney's not going to sue us, or if they do, they would lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, what they do is they'd throw, hugely expensive lawyers at us and just try to bury us in paperwork. So
that's when we bury them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the problem is that when a corporation has so much money and power and they want to use it in an unethical way, they can bury you in legal paperwork, and like the average person just really can't dig their way out from under it.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Disney Uncensored.
Yeah,
I'm not comfortable with this. So we got to find another merchandise.
Yes,
provider.
So sorry for people who are trying to buy the shirts when it suddenly went offline.
But they also they took our entire store offline and refused to give us any of the money that we'd earned up to that point, even though they'd earned the money, and we made a few dollars per T-shirt. So we also lost that. So it's very frustrating. But I've been trying to find a vendor who's willing to do this for us, and it's been harder than I thought.
Yeah. And anyone listening who has any ideas, please let us know. As long as the stuff's not made in China.
Yeah.
That is important.
That is important.
Well, and that was actually one of the reasons why it's been so hard.
Yeah.
Like the biggest challenge was getting mugs, because people had requested mugs, and then I called like 20 vendors, and almost all of them were made in China. And then like even the ones, there were like 2 that weren't, and there were issues they wouldn't do drop shipping, and it became Like, it's just too difficult to do because of China being such a key part of the supply chain for stuff. Like, even American companies, they're like, oh, we print it in America. It's like, yeah, but you buy the blank ceramic mugs from China and print it in Los Angeles. Like, yeah. Like, but this is still the problem. It's still made in China.
Maybe by slave labor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By Uyghurs in Xinjiang. But, speaking of having to deal with really frustrating issues with American companies, we've got Joe on the line. Let's pull him up and hear his story. So, joining us today is Zhou Fengsuo, one of the student leaders of the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989. He was also, at one point, on number 5 on China's most wanted list. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Well, great. So recently you held a Tiananmen Square massacre vigil on Zoom, the teleconferencing app. And then things didn't quite go as planned. Tell us what happened.
Actually, the conference itself went on smoothly. I mean, I was full of anxious anticipation during the whole process of preparing and in the meeting. But we actually finished the conference. It was long for 3 hours. The content was really very comprehensive, dense, because we have so many distinguished speakers that represent such a diverse group of the Tiananmen legacy. And I was really surprised by that. But then later, on June 7th in the evening, I found out that my Zoom account was closed without any explanation. Even today, we haven't really heard an explanation directly from the company. They have issued a statement to the journalists and recently on their website that I have seen, but they haven't communicated directly with us. At the same time, before the meeting, many of the invited speakers from China were under house arrest or arrested. Even today, the speakers are still getting calls from their parents. For example, there's one, Jing Y, in our speakers list. She is getting some call from her father in telling that the police has printed out her speech video on a piece of paper and threatened her father because of that. So that's the context for Zoom's closing our account. And then I knew that there are at least other 2 accounts were closed. So one is for Li Churen, the chairman of Hong Kong Airlines. The other one is for Wang Dan, another student leader from 1989. Both of them spoke at our conference, and both of them had separate events. Of course, Li Churen, he led the Hong Kong candlelight vigil at Victoria Park this year, even though it wasn't allowed by the police. Now, Hong Kong police is charging him with illegal gathering, and Wang Dan had a different event later. So we will all into this. Apparently, Zoom, they have admitted they were doing this from the order of Beijing, targeting Tiananmen commemoration. So this is part of the overall crackdown.
What made you want to use Zoom in the first place?
I think there are a lot of reasons. First, for us, because we have many speakers from China, and it is that's what made our conference different is that for the first time we have invited about 10 speakers from within China, and it took a lot for them to speak. It took courage. It took some technology know-how, for example, how to connect all that. So eventually, I think Zoom is really very easy to use. We can send them just one link. They can connect. We have tried that before the meeting, and it's not blocked in China. That's very important. We also want, because now Zoom is so popular after the pandemic, there are a lot of commercial use for it. We want these people who are using Zoom now to have an opportunity to know the TMN, the facts, and to join us at the video. So,
I mean, I know there's been a lot of concern about Zoom's connection to China, even before all this happened. That there's they have a research and development center in China. They have what do you call it, servers in China.
But a lot of their engineers, I think, are in China as well.
Yeah, and so now that this story comes out, that they locked down your account. They cut off. Was it 2 or 3 other Tiananmen visuals?
I think they cut off Wang Dun's separate Tiananmen event.
In the middle of it. And then banned, as you said, the Hong Kong activists. So this is shocking that, this company would do this. And it was because they were, the Chinese government actually asked them to do it.
Yes, that's what they have said in their statement. That's very condemning news from them. They admitted this. So I have a follow-up question. How did they get the order from Beijing? What kind of agency? Is that police? That government official? When? Where? How did they decide to do this? Lots of questions. And very importantly, now they claim that they wouldn't treat Chinese users the same way as U.S. users, and they may have to protect U.S. users according to U.S. law. But then he said they would do it, with the local government in China. We know, for example, initially they claimed that this was done in accordance with local law, but there's no law in China against Tiananmen commemoration. This is not something that's in the law. And for now, we know it's pervasive and arbitrary, the way they would interrupt a company, a social platform like Zoom.
That is interesting that you said that, because Zoom's defense is that they need to comply with local laws where they're operating. But have they said specifically which law they needed to comply with, since you bring up that commemorating Tiananmen is not against the law?
Never. I think they are not mentioning it again in their second statement. So they are trying to dodge it now. But for us, I think this is very important, how they would cooperate with, how they would work like this. I think in this incident, they are basically working as if, the police, they are policing the internet. They shut down our account without any communication with us. We are US-based, and they know that. Two accounts US-based, one Hong Kong-based, not from China. They know that. This raises a lot of questions, of course, in the future as to how they would act if there is some request, for example, Chinese government would put anyone under suspect based for anything, nothing. And then would Zoom comply?
Would they hand over information?
Right. I mean, it's crazy because Zoom is an American company that shut down the account belonging to you, an American citizen, for operating a conference that was hosted in America, and yet they did that because it was according to some Chinese law, which isn't actually a law.
Well, they've admitted that that was a mistake, and that moving forward, Zoom was like one of those rare holes in the Great Firewall of China. And so now they admitted they made a mistake, and now they'll just cut off Chinese users while still allowing the Americans or anyone outside of China to continue to operate.
Yeah, you have to protect the rights of Americans to speak freely and make sure Chinese people don't get to speak freely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. That it's basically becoming part of the war against Chinese people. It is enforcing the censorship and possibly surveillance on Chinese people if you just follow the Chinese government, because there's no regulation really on this. They will do it at their own will. And if you decide to cooperate, that basically means you would violate users' rights protection. So it's really a concern for us too. I'm really concerned what Zoom has done to the Chinese users. They never said anything about that. If they do it according to the order of Beijing, that's really worrying now.
When you got the notice on June 7th that your Zoom account was suspended, did you think it was because of the Tiananmen event?
Of course, yeah. I know, because that's the only event we have done on this account. From the beginning, we were preparing for the event when we created this account, and we paid lots of money. I didn't realize how much it was. It's almost 400 per month for the use, because I was hoping that even with all the problems that, for example, the current users of Zoom from the commercial side, that they may be able to gather because there's no firewall, in such a space. So I was actually looking for something really with huge capacity. I was looking for over 1,000 capacity, which they don't have. The highest capacity they have now is between, it's less than 1,000. That's what we paid for. But we also paid for the per host cost. That's like $90 each. We have hosts from New York, New Jersey, and Germany. So that's what we have done. That's only content out there. And after the conference, there were lots of reports about it, and the videos we posted on YouTube were getting a lot of hits that I could explain. But of course, I don't think the Chinese police needs to go far, because they were hunting down the speakers of our conference from China.
So have the speakers from your conference been detained? What's happened to them?
They are all released after the anniversary. That's like every year, that's the routine. But this year, a lot of them were very more harshly treated. So 3 were taken by police, and many were under house arrest, specifically warned not to participate in this meeting. So to prepare for this, we asked them to record their statement, which most of them did, and we were able to use it at the conference.
I'm just, the courage it takes for someone inside China to be willing to participate in this event. I mean, that takes a lot of guts.
Oh yeah, that's what really inspired me. I was under lots of pressure for me to do this. Uh, we know that even with a secure platform, they could be in trouble simply for speaking out. But these people know the danger, and most of them would. And so that's why we have to do the best to make their voices heard. That's why Zoom's closure of my account kind of it's an outrage. It's the way we such voice, the true voice of the victim of Tiananmen massacre, and these people who have fought so bravely for truth and justice for the last 31 years, they are being silenced by China. Now they are being silenced by Zoom.
Now, Zoom's not the first company you've had, a issue with. Didn't your LinkedIn account also get shut down?
Yeah, and for exactly the same reason, I think it was because some Tiananmen related content that I posted on LinkedIn, we decided to shut down. I think so. For now, it seems that Zoom is going to follow LinkedIn's example in that they will try to separate Chinese users from the rest.
Well, I think that's the main issue here. Like, China has erected this great firewall that basically cuts off the Chinese people from the rest of the world. Now, with Zoom, for all the problems the company has, it was briefly a way to actually get into China, to get through that firewall.
Exactly.
And now that's been plugged up.
Yeah.
So what is the solution here?
To me, I've been saying this all the time. I think this is not an issue for an individual company, even though Zoom was a willing accomplice in this crime. But we should hold them accountable. But on the other hand, the real solution is not with individual companies. Now, Beijing is setting the rules on information technology. We should change that. I believe that the principle of reciprocate and confront, that's the only way to do it. So this firewall that China has erected, it's not only to enslave Chinese people, it's also a commercial trade barrier for any companies. So that's why eventually these companies, one by one, they would go down this slippery slope. So the solution is we have to confront this together. But I believe U.S. companies should form some kind of alliance, and more importantly, the government and the society should have a coherent strategy against this, because this is not only for Chinese who suffer. We don't need to look too far. New York City suffers so much simply because of the pandemic, which has become a world disaster because there was no freedom of speech in China. It was covered up so well while people were dying. Doctors were not allowed to talk. So to change this, we have to put priority on removing the firewall before any commercial talk, for example, with trade talk, anything. Or even, I think, more importantly, maybe we should just ban Chinese companies outright from doing business in the United States. Or one step further, I would advocate just simply banning Chinese IPs from visiting U.S. website. That's just fair and square. If you do what they do to us, Yeah. So I think that's probably the only way to go. It will take a lot of courage for U.S. government to do this, but this is the only way. Probably we haven't tried, and it may work. So for now, the other solution is not good. What Zoom will be doing, as they stated, will be a disaster eventually. So that's what I've been saying for many years. Actually, this firewall, it's not just a Chinese issue. Of course, it enslaves Chinese, but it's also a big problem for the United States, for any companies in the United States, and for the interest of people here. So we need to confront this as what it is. And, just like when Reagan said, we must remove this wall, this firewall. We must remove. Otherwise, trade with China, as there is a wall, a firewall. So the firewall was established when China enters WTO. There is a deep connection that the world was hoping that technology and the global trade would change China, and the CCP was prepared. So they had this firewall in place about the same time that they would brainwash people. They would do surveillance on people, to at every move, every thought. They would even predict your next move, and think about such a totalitarian scheme in the cyberspace. It's really it's a threat to the world, not only the problem. Okay, so we have to change the game by confronting it directly. That's my proposal.
That's certainly a bold one. Yeah.
Well, hopefully the U.S. government takes you up on that. I like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, technologically, the U.S. has the power.
Yes.
To create software that could eventually take down the Chinese firewall or subvert it to the extent that Chinese people.
Yeah, I've been hearing about this, and my friend Mike Horowitz, we have been talking about this. I will do anything to make it possible. If we can break it, convert with some technological solution, that would be even better. But this is at the center of the issue now. We have to cut through it. We cannot. There's no way to look around.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we should just make China's firewall comply with China's constitution, namely Article 35 that ensures free speech.
Yes. We can.
I don't know. I like the idea of like really holding them to their own standards, like cut off global times, CGTN, all the Chinese state-run media from having access to Twitter, Facebook, because we don't want them to, be in violation of their own laws. That'd be sad for them.
Well, that's proof that China is the biggest victim.
Yeah, not only that, there's another side of it. China always claims that, oh, look how successful we are. We've been, the economy grows, whatever. In the background is that the free and open internet has been providing the vital intellectual property that China depends on for growing the economy. If we cut that off, there will be a big problem. And now it's growing like a cancer. The rest of the world is free, but they have this fortress out there, and they can invade us. And whereas we have no solution, that's not good. We definitely have to change it from the source.
Yeah.
But it would be unfair to cut off China from stealing our trade secrets over the internet.
All right.
They don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about how Chinese people for years would jump the wall, right?
Yes, then they will have to jump the wall, if we cut off. So I think recently there's a really good example for this is that the China used to ban American Airlines from going into China after the pandemic. So this is a recent issue. And then Trump administration said, if we would ban Chinese airlines from U.S., immediately, they cooperated. Now they allow U.S. Airlines to go into China.
Oh, yeah, but they said that didn't have anything to do with the U.S. government banning Chinese airlines.
Right, we all know. So that's a kind of mutual beneficial equilibrium we want to achieve. But to do that, we have to confront them. We are facing a hostage situation. We are kidnapping Chinese people, using them as hostage. And we have to confront this issue head on. So I think we can think it's bold, but that could be the solution to force them to open up, is by cutting them off.
Well, thank you again for joining us today. I'm really sorry to hear about what Zoom did, but it's been encouraging to see how big the story got.
Yes.
So hopefully the days of American companies getting away with this kind of behavior is coming to an end.
Right. Yeah. The Zoom should be held responsible, and we need a bold, effective solution against this firewall.
Well, yes. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Always my pleasure.
Well, kind of makes our own frustrations seem a little less relevant? Not relevant. That's not the right word.
Like less horrible to deal with. Like I just was ranting earlier about Disney.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but at least I'm not.
Disney's not going to come and detain you.
Yeah, I'm not getting detained ahead of like talking about it. After though, maybe.
Don't speak so soon.
The Disney police are coming. They'll
the
be
Mickey
dressed.
Mouse Brigade.
I was going to go for dressed as stormtroopers.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, they own the copyright for that now. So
Yeah, I had a Spanish teacher in high school, and whenever we'd goof off, he'd be like, "No Mickey Mousing around." And now I realize that he may have been violating copyright.
I don't understand why it's Mickey Mousing. That's
I don't know. He was Colombian. That was just how he talked. It was like a thing.
okay.
Huh.
Yeah.
Amazing how American culture kind of trickles throughout the world
Yeah.
and becomes something else
Yeah.
in the process.
But when he said no Mickey Mousing around, I knew exactly what Senor Cruz meant, and that we better behave ourselves. He was very strict. Good teacher though. Yeah. At any rate,
¿Dónde está el biblioteca? La biblioteca.
we don't go to the biblioteca anymore. Not just because of the lockdown, but because who goes to the biblioteca?
That's right.
Yeah. But at any rate, what Joe Fengsuo and the people on his call are dealing with is way, way more serious.
But I really like what he was saying about like options for dealing with the firewall, because that's really like a fundamental issue that
Right.
needs to be addressed before anything can really change.
Yeah, I mean, but I think fundamentally, like American companies and the U.S. government for a long time has just been afraid to fight back with the same level of force or the same level of laws or restrictions.
Companies are not interested in fighting back. Companies want to get into the they want to somehow get over the firewall or be inside
Right.
the firewall. They're not interested in getting rid of it.
Right. I mean, the reality is that dealing with China is way less an issue of which political party is in charge than an issue of corporate America has wanted to get into that China market for a long time. And it was, I believe, largely corporate lobbying that had pushed the Clinton administration to get into China, corporate lobbying that had pushed the Bush administration and the Obama administration to do nothing regarding China. So it's just like partisan politics aside, you have this huge, very greedy financial interest that didn't take into account even like the long-term sustainability of their companies or the long-term well-being of their investors, but just like let's go for the money.
I just remember reading some articles about companies, I think this was under the Obama administration, who were complaining to the US government about all of the intellectual property theft that was happening to them in China. At the same time, begging the US government not to publicly disclose this.
Wasn't that also to protect the companies because the CEOs could get fired, the stocks could tank?
They didn't want to piss off China, and they also didn't want to let on how much they had been hacked or stolen from and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, even when we talk about estimates of how much U.S. intellectual property has been stolen, and I think the estimates are something like, the neighborhood of several hundred million a year officially.
Official U.S. statistics.
But then, so many of those companies that have been hacked or have been stolen from or lost in more subtle ways, like, they're just not reporting it. And that information will perhaps never come out.
What's that? That just happened. Oh.
Yeah.
I think there was something interesting about the idea that the U.S. government could try to, tear down the wall. Because I think we don't understand to what extent Chinese people are being controlled now by what social media they use or like the technology that controls their lives. And I'm thinking about this example that there was a reporter, Bethany Allen Ibrahimian. She's a reporter for Axios, and she's a US-based reporter, has a WeChat account, or had a WeChat account, which is the Chinese social media that's, it's everything, right? It's Twitter, Facebook. It is your Venmo. It's
like imagine the worst techno dystopian sci-fi novel
app.
Yeah, it's that.
Yeah, you need it to talk to everybody. You need it to access your bank accounts. You need it to be able to pay people because people have stopped using cash in China. They use like WeChat Pay or Alipay. So like your life is in this app. She did this experiment where she changed her WeChat password to
remember family-friendly show.
Yes, I'm not going to say it, but she wanted to think of the most offensive thing that she could say to the Chinese Communist Party as an experiment. So she changed her WeChat password to F, the CCP, uncensored version. And then she said within 45 seconds, her account was just locked and just closed. There was no way to, appeal it. There was no way to, get it open. And she was like, for me, this is not a huge deal. But imagine if you're somebody in China, right, who like this app is your life. And, now it's going to be locked forever.
Well, that is an issue. But the other issue is that like it knows your password and censors you.
Right.
For that. Like that's
obviously
horrifying.
WeChat can access what your password is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So don't use it. If you have it on your phone, delete it.
I think we did an entire episode about WeChat last year.
I think so.
Yeah. Wow. We just do so many episodes that I forget exactly what happens.
I mean, at the same time, it's become the tool that you need to use. I have, relatives and family friends in China who are like, you don't have WeChat? Like, how am I supposed to contact you if you don't have WeChat? You know what I mean? So at the same time, if I got WeChat, I would not put it on my phone.
You need a burner phone.
You need a burner phone. And then anything I said to them on WeChat could get them in trouble, right? So, yeah, very definitely so. So, the idea that like we don't realize exactly what's happening behind the firewall in a lot of ways. And there are people who jump the firewall, but that takes some effort. And the Chinese Communist Party has tried to make it to disincentivize that as much as possible.
Yeah.
By being like, well, like, you can't have Twitter, but you can have WeChat. You can't have, other stuff that other people can. But like, do you really need to? We have our own like apps that
we
are
took
popular.
the effort to steal the intellectual property of these American things and create Chinese knockoffs. Why do you need the original?
Yeah, why do you need YouTube if you have Bilibili? Or, although I really hate how Bilibili, all of the comments scroll across the video. So it's really distracting. But I guess if you're used to that.
But does Bilibili censor Communist Bandit and Wu Mao from their comment section? Well, yes, they probably do.
I think it's probably a little bit more extreme than that.
More extreme.
But
that is, of course, what YouTube was doing. If you didn't hear that story, YouTube accidentally, they said, was censoring the Chinese characters for Communist Bandit and
50 Cent.
50 Cent Army.
It was. I don't think
Just
it was
50
even.
cents.
It was
Wu
just
Mao.
Wu Mao.
It
Yeah.
was Wu Mao.
But-
Anyways, they're all a bunch of filthy communist bandits.
This actually reminds me of this. We haven't told the story, right? About how on June 4th, which is the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, all of these social media apps in China locked the ability to change your profile photo.
Oh yeah, but we haven't talked about that.
So they locked the ability to change your profile photo because in the past, people had tried to sneakily commemorate like the Tiananmen Square massacre by changing their profile photo to like a candle or, a tank or something that was, May 35th or something, so
I like how just changing it to a candle is subversive.
yeah. So they just locked the ability to change your profile photo at all. And then there are just all these Chinese people complaining on these social media apps because they don't know why. Or maybe some of them know why, because some of them are kind of making like allusions to like why it happened, but other people are just seem like totally clueless. Like they're just like, oh, I just got into a new relationship and I wanted to change my photo and I can't, like all of this stuff. But what seems like a small thing actually has all of this, deep like political, social censorship
a
and
butterfly
stuff around
effect.
it. Yeah.
Mm.
So, it's a difficult situation.
And
now.
a lot of it is because of collaboration, essentially, with the U.S. companies that help China build this technological empire. Cisco
Built the firewall.
built the firewall. I'm glad that company still exists. Bunch
The,
of communist bandits.
the Golden Shield Project, as it was called at the time.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
much better, right? It's-
Golden Shield. It's protection
Mhm.
against people speaking freely.
But yeah, hopefully we're at the beginning of a sea change and people will realize that there's actually more money to be made not supporting horrible communist authoritarian regimes.
Mm.
Is there?
Yes,
Where's that money for us? We're not seeing that money.
not yet. But I'm thinking of the podcast that will come out after this
Yeah. So stay tuned next week.
to find out how to invest in freedom,
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
doesn't it? So check back next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell,
I'm Shelley Chang.
And I'm Matt Ganejda.
and we'll see you next week for that super interesting episode.